Hey guys, thanks for checking out another one of our videos. You are not going to believe the times that Rajon Rondo went a little too far. Rondo has been deemed as a dirty player from time to time, but that hasn't stopped him from being one of the best point guards the game has ever seen. Although there were certainly times when Rajon went over the line with his antics on the court. This first one happens to be a fight that turned into a brawl, and all because of Rajon Rondo. See, another player on his team went up for a layup and got fouled. He'd fallen pretty hard to the floor and missed the shot, but it was clear that the play was whistled dead already. Rondo went to help his teammate up off the ground, but didn't make any effort to walk around the opposing player who fouled his teammate. Instead of just walking around, Rondo put two hands into his chest and shoved him backwards. And as any other player would do in this situation, the guy ran back and they both grabbed one another. Rondo didn't just stop there though, he escalated it even further by driving the opposing player all the way back into the first row of the stands behind the basketball stanchion. Players were diving on top of them while officials and other coaches desperately attempted to pull people out of the growing brawl that was taking place off the court. Rondo was also seen ripping and tugging on the dude's jersey while he was falling to the ground later in the clip. But thankfully, the two got separated shortly after that happened. Personally, I think Rondo was completely out of line here and took things way too far. I get that he was probably just upset at the dude for fouling his teammate here, but to randomly shove him because he wouldn't step out of your way is a little too much if you ask me. Plus, the foul wasn't ridiculously blatant either. It was a hard foul, don't get me wrong, but nothing that would have warranted an ejection or anything. Rondo simply had to just walk around him and give his friend a hand up, and that would have ended the scenario entirely. This next one was downright uncalled for. Let me give you a little background first before we dive into the whole story. Now, since the NBA has allowed fans back in stadiums to cheer on their favorite teams, some have taken the liberty to trash talk a little too much. We've been seeing countless NBA superstars take to social media and interviews to express their concern about the fans around them. People like Russell Westbrook and recently LeBron James have had racist and completely unwarranted death threats hurled towards them. Some players just don't like to sit back and let security do the talking though. People like Rondo like to get back at them himself. So earlier this season, with the Lakers losing both of their games to start the year, a disappointed Lakers fan was trying to get into it with Rondo the entire game. After a little trash talking, Rondo ended up standing in the corner of the court, right in front of the fan who was sitting courtside. It's not known what was being said between the two guys, but cameras caught Rondo pointing a finger gun at the fan, literally inches away from his face. I believe Rondo even acted as if he was pulling the trigger, though that might be a little bit of a stretch. Either way though, he invaded the fan's personal space by putting his hand that close, and ultimately, I believe the fan was escorted out of the game. Probably because he made contact back with Rondo and slapped his hand away from him. Rondo was later penalized for the whole situation though, and got fined for that finger gun. Despite fans going over the line more often, as a veteran like Rondo, he should know better than to point even fake guns that close to other people's faces, especially if you're literally in the middle of a game where your team really needs you to be focused on trying to win. Now, everybody knows about this next situation. It was one that got fans all over the world buzzing. The Los Angeles Lakers were playing the Houston Rockets, and Brandon Ingram had gotten upset with something that James Harden did. Ingram gave Harden a bit of a shove in the back, and the two got up into each other's faces to argue it out. The two men got separated pretty quickly actually, and nothing escalated after that push. However, while the camera was still following both Harden and Ingram, you could see a few veteran players chatting it up with a few officials. Among those players were Rondo, LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Chris Paul, and Eric Gordon. All of a sudden, Rondo and Paul started yapping at one another, and before you knew it, all you saw was a shove, then Rondo throwing a punch at Paul's face. Paul swung a few times of his own while they started to fall onto the ground in an all-out brawl. Then, right after, you saw Ingram fly into the pile to start getting physical with Rockets players himself, throwing a solid right hook at somebody down there. When they showed the replay at a clearer angle, you could see that Paul put his finger right in the face of Rondo, which is when Rondo decided to throw that punch. Again, it really didn't matter who instigated it or how it played out. As a veteran who's been in the league a long time, Rondo should have known better than to do that. Had he just shoved Paul away or looked towards the ref, then nobody would have gotten suspended, nor would they have punched at all. It would have calmed down a lot quicker than what actually happened, all because Rondo was the first guy to start swinging. Now, as you probably could have guessed, Paul, Ingram, and Rajon were all subsequently suspended for their actions. Oh, and one more thing, before we move on to the next story, we've got to add on the fact that Rondo may have even spit on Paul during the scuffle. Rumors were swirling around afterwards that Rondo actually tried to spit on the veteran guard either before the fight started or during the scuffle on the ground when punches were being thrown. Obviously, Rajon denied those claims, but there was definitely a lot of steam behind these rumors regardless. Moving on with another story that a lot of you guys have probably already heard about too. It was shared by Kendrick Perkins a while back. It sort of explained why Rajon Rondo hates and will always hate Ray Allen. I've always thought that hating somebody that you have grown with forever is a bit of a strong thing to say, but Rondo is clear that nothing is too far when talking about Allen. Perkins said that Rondo happened to catch wind about Allen trying to get him traded, and then it all went downhill. Rondo and Allen had clear animosity towards one another from that point on, and Perkins said that the two men even put on boxing gloves and fought a few rounds to try and get some anger out on one another. Shortly after that, Allen ended up ditching the Boston Celtics to join the Miami Heat for a clear and easy road to an NBA championship. And it was clear that none of those Boston players really liked Allen after that, and honestly, how could you blame them? However, Rondo going so far as to box him and hate him for the rest of eternity seems a little too far if you ask me. At some point, I would have imagined him to bury the hatchet or at least just move on from the hatred, but he doesn't seem to want to. None of these guys do, especially Kevin Garnett. Now, maybe if Rondo and Garnett would have just subscribed to our channel, they wouldn't have had these issues in the first place. Wait, you still haven't subscribed either? Make sure you do, because you don't want to end up like Rondo and Ray Allen here, guys. Hopefully, someday Rondo can take it down a notch and stop hating him forever, even if they don't talk or hang out like best buddies. Allen really was just trying to do what was best for him by switching teams, but I can't defend him for asking Rondo to get traded. That's not the greatest thing to do to your friend. Alright, moving on. This next one was completely unnecessary for Rondo to do. The Lakers were going up against the Oklahoma City Thunder in a close game. Dennis Schroder was driving into the lane when he got the ball swatted away from him. Somehow, miraculously, he retained possession, but got his pass intercepted by Alex Caruso. Now, as Caruso was running out down court, he bobbled the ball and bounced it out of bounds, falling down in the process. Schroder was seen laughing and smiling while he went over to Caruso on the ground. He wasn't taunting him or anything like that, and even reaching his hand out to help Caruso get back on his feet. But as Caruso grabbed his hand to get up, Rondo walked over and literally broke their grip up so that he could pick him up on his own, then proceeded to give Schroder the cold shoulder as if he shouldn't be communicating with his team. Nothing hurtful was done or said between Dennis and Alex, which is why this was pretty surprising when I watched it for the first time. The cameras panned away after that to different players, but made its way back to those two when referees had to blow the whistle and give them double technical fouls. They just wouldn't stop arguing and getting in each other's faces, but no physical contact was made the entire time. The refs obviously felt like it was serious enough to stop play and punish them though. Fast forward a little later down the line, and Dennis was running over to defend Rondo, and Rondo stopped suddenly and stuck his hip out a bit, ultimately bumping Schroder down low and forcing the game to get stopped and a foul to be called. The two didn't argue at all, but because of their previous scuffle and the way that it looked intentional, the refs actually ejected Rondo from the game. So this whole thing was totally unnecessary from Rondo. He didn't need to hip check Schroder like that, because it definitely wasn't going to change the play at all, and he certainly didn't need to get in the way and push Schroder off of his teammate when he was just trying to help him up. Finally, we come to the battle between Rondo and Kirk Hinrich. The Celtics were playing the Chicago Bulls, and Hinrich found himself wide open on a fast break. Rondo was right next to him, but instead of jumping up to block the shot, he kind of just moved his body over at least to make the layup difficult. And in the process, he tripped Hinrich and caused him to fall hard on his chest, slamming his head into the ground. Thankfully, he got up all right and got himself patched up and back in the game. But that animosity must have stayed around between the two of them, because later, things got a little worse. Hinrich had boxed out Rondo for a rebound, and when a Chicago teammate grabbed the board, Hinrich continued to push Rondo out of the play to open a lane for his guy to run through. Rondo must have thought that was disrespectful because he grabbed Hinrich's arm and swung him backwards into the scorer's table on the sideline. This, of course, infuriated Hinrich as he stormed at Rajon and gave him a shove with 2 forearms. Okay, so while Hinrich was boxing out Rondo a little longer than he should have been, it wasn't anything intentional whatsoever. Rondo, taking his opportunity to fling him back into the scorer's table, was totally over the line and outright dangerous for the other guy. Had he fallen, he could have hit his head on the table or hurt his spine if his back hit hard enough. That just is not something needed in the sport. Hey, thanks for watching this one, guys. The video on the left is the one YouTube thinks you should watch next, but I think that this one might be more your style. Times when Rajon Rondo impressed the world.